Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lino Martinez. Today, I would love to welcome back Tina Erwin. This is her first. What kind of word is first? Oh, my goodness. Her fifth time on A Little Less Fear podcast. Amazing. Tina has studied metaphysics all of her life, gaining insight into the mystical world of magic and spirituality. She is the author of 8 books on metaphysics. Her writing comes from an intense desire to know and understand the hard science behind the unseen world of action and reaction, combined with the sincere desire to share this understanding with other knowledge seekers. Today, we are discussing karma, in which she has 3 books in which she deeply dives into this incredible topic, karma. Some of these books include Soul Evolution, Past Lives and Karmic Ties. Another book that she has is called Karma and Frequency. And another book on karma is The Lightworker's Guide to Everyday Karma. Welcome back to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Tina Erwin, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being on your show.
And I love you on my show. This is really amazing. 5 times. It's just so much information. And every single time I'm left with my mouth open and ready to dig in for more knowledge and just soak it all in. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I love being here.
So today's topic is on karma, and I have a lot of questions on karma. I actually still study Buddhism. I'm not as dedicated as I used to be. And what I mean by dedicated is reading from the books and being as deep as I used to be. However, I remember the topic on karma, and it was one of the biggest chapters in one of our books. And so a lot of it left me in the very beginning feeling a little sad about karma. And what made me sad about karma is that some of the things that we learned is that whatever scars you see on your body is equal to a certain pain that you caused somebody in a past life. And so people that are listening to this podcast for the first time, I survived a rare genetic disease called Muckle-Wells syndrome. I had over 40 surgeries. And when I look at my body, I look at my scars, and I've got some pretty incredible scars. My abdomen has been opened 3 times. I've had a stoma where I catheterized from. There are holes. I used to have a feeding tube. So I look at my body and I'm thinking, what kind of pain did I cause other people for this to have come back in this life so drastically? And if it is karma, I accepted it. I'm hopefully cleared some of that karmic debt because I've got so much love and peace in my heart. Is this true? I mean, obviously nobody's really going to know for sure until we cross that other side. But if anyone's going to know, it's going to be Tina Erwin that studies and specializes in metaphysics.
I'm very careful about saying what happened to someone in a past life because it's a violation of spiritual law to tell someone what their past life was. And, what if you're wrong? What if you're getting a sense and it's not quite correct?
Sure.
What I would offer you is that you're having a series of experiences. And what those experiences offer you is a compassion for others who are suffering or who go through something that no one else can understand. And it offers you an opportunity to embrace a larger view of being compassionate to people you don't know or people who are suffering in ways we can't imagine. And part of your podcast is maybe a little less fear of things we don't understand, and perhaps a little more tolerance in ways we wouldn't have anticipated. So you're going through this is a huge challenge. At the same time, you're not the same person you were. You're wiser now, and wisdom comes from really tough experience if you embrace it. If you reject it and become bitter, it creates a hardness inside the body. If you embrace it and you welcome the light of knowledge, then it helps the body to heal on larger levels. So that's just one viewpoint of what that could be.
I love that. I love that, especially because when I was going through that chapter of karma in my Buddhist class, I had a lot of emotional suffering that came with feeling perhaps that I caused that much pain to other people in a past life. And I did a lot of crying. and a lot of I'm sorry's to whoever I've hurt in past lives, a lot of meditations going back to people I can't remember, and just really deeply apologizing and feeling overwhelmingly sad about the type of pain I may have caused others. But what I do gain from my own personal knowledge or my own personal wisdom and grace with everything I've gone through is exactly what you just said right now. Because this is when I dive into my own personal wisdom, when I'm by myself thinking about these things, what I do feel is that now I am able to relate to so many others and be compassionate with their pain and losing their voices, or losing their hearing, or whatever it is that I've gone through. I feel that I'm able to connect with more people collectively because of the suffering that I've gone through, and I'm able to love people more because I've gained self-love from all of this. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Glad to help.
So yeah, going into karma, how do you understand karma?
Karma is a law of physics. God is the first physicist. And the law of physics states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And the best visual I can offer you is if you drop a pebble in a pool, that's the action. The reaction are the ripples that echo out from it. The smaller the population, the bigger the ripples. The more dense the population, the smaller the ripples, because you're now colliding with all these other people. That's why population density, you'll see higher rates of crime, because people need a little space in their togetherness, and it can create irritability and difficulty. Also, you have an awful lot of individuals with different frequencies. And when you're studying karma, that's why I wrote a book on karma and frequency, you begin to understand that everything in the universe is based on a frequency, whether it's washing machines, and if the frequency is off, then the washing machine breaks down. The higher the frequency, the more beautifully things run. If you'll notice, I mean,
That's so true. Yeah.
I married a car guy. My son is a master mechanic for BMW, Rolls-Royce, anything that rolls. And my brothers are all car people. So let's use a car example.
Okay.
When you look at the timing in a car, how is the engine moving? How does it sound? When you get in it, how does it feel? It's the frequency of the car. And how clean is your car? In the Everyday Karma book, I have a whole section on car karma. The cleaner you keep your car, the more you keep it running. I had a BMW that was 22 years old, ran like a Swiss watch, because once a year I would hand it over to my son and say, give her whatever she wants. And the car was kept clean and garaged. There was no trash or anything. And the car was very happy. Cars are made of metal. Metal absorbs frequency. So if you got in your car and you said, oh, I love this car, and I loved my car, I gave my car a name. Her name was Grace. She just glowed. Really, I mean, a lot of people say, oh my God, you have a BMW, it's going to have a lot of problems. Nope, did not have that. I did not have that experience. I was careful with the car. I was respectful. I kept the car clean, because cleaning washes away negativity, which helps keep frequency high. It's all related. So do I have great car karma, or did I create the karma of having a great car?
It's a good question. Could it be both?
I think it can absolutely be both. And I think that whether it's your car or you take good care of your home, that's the whole basis of Feng Shui, is raising the frequency, keeping your spaces in balance, clean, not too much clutter, pleasing to the eye, balanced in color. When you're achieving balance, you're feeling good about things. When you're out of balance, there's something that isn't working well. And when you're looking at karma, what you do to your body at an early age is karmically visited upon you as you hit older ages. So the more care you take of the vessel you came in with, the longer the vessel will work for you. It isn't some mystical Eastern religion. It's just a logic trail. Karma is endlessly logical.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. And so, karmic frequency, by raising a karmic frequency, you allow a more balanced flow into your life.
Let me give you an example.
Yes.
That's very practical example. When I was in the Navy, I was a terrorist expert for the submarine force. I know it sounds really weird, but that's what I did. That was my specialty. But when I got the job, I had no idea how to do the job. And so admitting what I didn't know gave me an enormous freedom to ask everybody how they did things. How did you protect this? What did you do about that? So I talked to the head of security for Southland Corporation. Southland Corporation owns all the 7-Elevens around the country. And I said, you can't use weapons and you can't do all these things. What do you do to cut down crime at your businesses? And they said, it was the strangest thing. We started playing Montevani or elevator music or light classical, and crime, and we planted trees and we put plants around the building, and crime dropped.
Wow.
Dramatically. I said, so, and because I study elements of all different sciences, I thought, okay, they raised the frequency. So if somebody's listening to hard acid rock, which is a lower music frequency.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone likes that, that's just fine. But that frequency is not going to be the same frequency as Mozart, which is the highest frequency. That doesn't mean everybody has to run around and love Mozart.
Right.
I mean, you could love the Beatles or you could love country western. But if you have a frequency where the tonal quality is a loud, repetitive, lower frequency, then it shifts something in your body. The body responds to what it hears. Whether someone says, you're a really good person, you shift the energy in the body and raise a person's frequency. If you say you're a terrible person, you have just lowered that person's frequency for a certain window of time. So if you play beautiful music, you put your customers in a mindset that's pretty positive. In general terms, I mean, does this work for everything? Probably not. But it worked for this company. It didn't help me with submarines because I can't play Montevani outside of a submarine. But what it showed me was that sometimes it's Occam's razor. The simplest solution can be a very, very powerful solution. And this was also proven by Dr. Masaru Emoto in his study of messages from water.
Oh, yes.
And this goes right back to karma.
Yeah.
So what you believe to be true about yourself, you create. If you believe that you are here to help humanity without preaching, and you have to believe what I believe, but from a place of observing, tolerance, I help where I can. And if it's not mine to do, then you step back. Mm-hmm. That person's going to have an experience. And sometimes there's nothing you can do with it. You can do to stop that experience. I'm getting slightly off track, but what Emoto proved was that the energy of words have power. And those words create a karmic ripple effect. And those are important things because I've written many books. There's some also tremendous authors out there, and I would direct also not only Dr. Emoto's work, but David Hawkins's work on power. He has an astounding book called Power versus Force. again, there's some wonderful authors out there. And I really believe that David's work is astounding, because he has an entire book that discusses frequency and how frequency affects your life. And as you are working toward a frequency of long-term good health, which also opens you to the heart of compassion, the bodhisattva, which
Yes.
is a major Buddhist concept and is really important for the whole world, actually.
Absolutely.
You are shifting your own karma in a positive direction. So that's kind of a long explanation.
But it makes sense, because one of my questions was, I was wondering if we could change the trajectory of bad karma by raising our vibration. So, okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, thank you for answering that. That's incredible.
Anyone can do that. Sometimes it's the simplest solutions can be very, very beneficial. Change what you say about yourself. I hear this especially with women who say, oh, I'm so fat, or I'm so ugly, or I'm this, or this in my body isn't perfect. But you're a creation of the divine. You're whole, perfect, and complete in this moment. Louise Hay wrote a book, You Can Heal Your Life. She addresses those very things. Again, wonderful authors out there that can show you a different path you can take. And this goes back to your question of, do we have choices, and can we change within ourselves who we want to be, and how is that reflected karmically?
Yes.
And the answer to that is your friends will change. If you have a person who's been with a really bad group of people, and you decide you want to leave that group of people, and you're shifting, and you're with people who are happy every day, and they say, hi, how are you doing? Or let's go to a movie, or hey, let's just take a walk and enjoy it. It's a beautiful day. Simple things. Karma is not complicated. Then you will change, and you'll feel so much better and happier about yourself.
That definitely makes sense. This is really interesting, because talking about karma in terms of frequency and vibration, and changing who you're around with, and even the way you think, and the way that you even say things about yourself, and just raising your own vibration. Because I mean, really, prior to talking about karma in the terms of vibration, I was always under the impression that karma sometimes just has such a negative weight to it. The word karma, like, well, that's bad karma. You always hear bad karma. Or, hey, that's good karma. Good, do this you'll get good karma if you do this. So, but even simple things, such as even just changing the way that you talk to your car, or changing the way that you look, the way that you feel about yourself, and looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I look good, versus like, I don't like what I look. I don't like what I look like. You're already changing that karmic frequency. That's really interesting to look at it that way, rather than I did something to cause something bad, and now it's going to come back to me no matter what.
It's elegantly simple. We come into this life, I mean, I'm never going to be taller than 5'1". So I spend my life looking up to an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
and I have a lot of wonderful people to look up to. And that's a better way to look at it. Like, oh my gosh, all the jokes in the Navy were endless. I was the duty midget. I mean, it was hysterical. But I thought that it was a lot of fun.
Sure.
I didn't take it personally. The jokes were endless. And then I started to collect them, and I would say, I heard a better one than that. And then it opened this door of laughter, and humor eased many, many difficult situations.
Definitely.
You
Speaking
don't
of height,
always assume people are bad.
speaking of height, are we karmically born into the way that we look, our height, our features? Is all of that part of karma as well?
I believe it can be. And I believe that you come in with your DNA, and you come in with a variety of experiences you're going to have. What might some of those experiences be? Everyone is going to experience grief. I would love to tell you that's not true. I'm so clairvoyant, I just know it. It's simply going to happen because all mortal people need to know what it feels like to lose something that you love. Maybe it's your cat, your dog, your parent, your sister, your job, a treasured item. Learning how to deal with the attachment is part of your karmic path. It's the lesson you need to learn. We have many lessons to learn about love. People assume love is relationship, but I loved my job. I love my job right now. I love being on your show. I love that feeling of camaraderie and partnership that you and I have when we have these discussions. So there's so many kinds of love. I've been fortunate to be married to someone I have loved for 50 years. Been married 50 years.
Wow,
you can believe
that's
that.
amazing.
50 years. But he and I happen to know that we have been married many times before, and one of us always died. This is our first life where we get to have a whole life together. And we get to experience that love for a long time. I mean, we might have another 10, 20 years to go. But to be married 50 years, that's pretty something. And, you know, we love our families, and there are a lot of loves in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when people count their blessing. What they're counting are the things that bring them loving happiness.
When people say count your blessings, these are the things that bring you loving happiness.
Yes.
And so, okay, let's see here. Let's talk about, can we talk about karma and reincarnation?
Well, I have a theory.
Okay, yes.
Because I always have theories and
Yeah.
we're always thinking. But my theory is that who we are is based on a variety of things, not just, oh, it's your DNA, or, oh, it's your karma. Well, what if it's more than that? And I talk about that in this book on soul evolution. And I actually have a photograph that's not going to show up very well, but it's a wheel.
I see it.
And on this wheel, your current life is based on your karma from past lives, your early childhood experiences, your free will choices, your past lives, your current life experiences, your soul evolution status, and whether you come in with a soul purpose or a soul mission. And you're made up of all of these combinations. And that's why people are complex. And this is true even for twins or triplets or, you know, multiple birth siblings. You all come in with a karmic path, even if you have pretty almost identical DNA. And some people come in with a life purpose, and some people come in with a life mission.
Wow.
And there's a big difference between them.
What is the difference?
If you grew up in a household where you were abused, let's say you suffered physical, mental, spiritual, or sexual abuse, it could be that your entire soul purpose is to survive childhood. Whoa. Think about that. That's there are thousands of people who suffer so much as children.
Yeah.
And they actually survived and made it to adulthood. Their purpose may very well have been to survive. And it's like, okay, I survived this. Now, what am I going to do with all that experience? Is it going to make me bitter, or is it going to make me want to make the world a better place? And I have had thousands of clients who suffered horribly, many, many things. And many of them didn't, I would say the majority of them never had children because they wanted to understand the life they were living, the childhood they had. They wanted to heal themselves. Healing yourself from a traumatic childhood can easily be a life purpose. And it's an important one because you're setting yourself up for your next life. If you healed this life, if you looked at the cruelties that were visited upon you, if you study how these things work, in the next life, you will, especially if you cross over, you will have the potential to do and have and be wiser, perhaps to have a very different childhood in the future, and perhaps to become a parent with a great deal more of inherent wisdom than you would have ever thought you could have had. So that is a life purpose from my viewpoint.
Okay.
You need to move through and understand the current life you're living. But there are people who come in with a life mission, and there are not as many of them. And that means that that person has something to do on the world stage in some way, shape, or form. And people think, oh, well, they're going to be a politician or something, or they could be, maybe they wanted to be a doctor. Maybe they have been a doctor life after life. And by God, this life, they're going to save that person with all this cool technology. And so their purpose may be to make a difference on a larger level. And sometimes they don't wake up to that till they're a little bit later. And I'll use the example of Princess Diana. She had a horrible childhood. I mean, people say, oh, well, she had a privileged childhood. Any childhood, whether you have a whole lot of money or not a lot of money, if nobody loved you and you didn't feel like anyone loved you, that's a pretty horrible childhood. Yes. If you're a little kid, you don't know what money means. You just know whether somebody loves you and they care what happens to you. And she didn't necessarily always feel that. And then she ended up with a marriage where she was simply a figurehead. And she believed the fairy tale. And she didn't understand what was she here for? Until she finally awakened to the path of spiritual service to others, using her position as the Princess of Wales. Now, her sister-in-law, the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, manages as patron for 350 charities.
That's incredible.
She is thrilled every day she gets up because she gets to be of service to others. That's really important to her. Diana finally awakened to the power of her position and how she could use it on the world stage. And then before she died, she was helping victims of landmines. Queen Noor of Jordan took that over. She's another example of someone who, got her degree and all of a sudden she marries King Hussein and she is the Queen of Jordan. Overnight, she went from being a 20-something to a queen. She completely changed so many lives in Jordan. She is a woman with a life mission. She recognized it and she took it on. Let's look at Dr. Emoto. His mission, or Louise Hay, any of these authors who are trying to share knowledge, they have a huge mission and they're reaching a wider audience. It's another way to look at it.
But can you also have both a soul purpose and a soul mission in one life?
You can. There's several very interesting stories. One of them was made into a made-for-TV movie about 10 children who were the children of an FBI agent whose job was to stop child abuse and child trafficking. But this was the same man who abused his children every single day. And of those 10 children, one of the girls grew up and she decided she was going to fight back. She became an attorney. She became an advocate for abused children, and she made it her mission. You hear people say, it is my mission too. They're telling you on a subconscious level, they may have survived something terrible, but they have now, a person on a mission in any way they can to make the world a better place. So what happened to them doesn't happen to somebody else. So absolutely, yes, that can happen. Both can happen.
I love this. I absolutely love that. Thank you. So, yeah, I have another question here. What about learning specific life lessons and karma? Let's say that something keeps repeating in our life and we keep going in a circle or in a cycle and repeating something over and over that's not good for us, and we don't learn this karmic cycle or this karmic lesson. Is I mean, I'm assuming that we would come back and have to repeat that lesson in order to get rid of that karmic debt. Does that feel right to you? And I'm
Yes,
pausing in between because I'm not sure if it feels right to me because I'm not too sure.
karma has an infinite number of theme and variation elements to it. So I am very careful about absolutes. Sometimes it's really a good idea to use real life examples. And I saw a fascinating 60 Minutes show about this young Black kid. He's a grown man now, but when he was a kid, he was in foster care and he was this troublemaker, and everybody was mad at everybody. He was always in trouble. And I mean, the people around him thought he was going to end up life in prison. I mean, they were thinking that's where this kid's headed. And this one teacher never believed he was a bad person. She believed that he was such a good person inside, and he needed to learn to see it. And every time he got in trouble, she would go to see him over and over and over. And she sat him down and she said, "You're at a crossroads. You can choose this path or this path." And she got him in the chorus in high school. And holy Christmas, this man had an operatic voice that blew people away.
That's amazing.
He started getting attention, then he got a scholarship, and he is a performer at the I think it's the Metropolitan Opera House in New York. He is highly paid, happy marriage, wonderful children, and he wants to turn around and help others and foster programs, a life purpose and a life mission. He could turn it around, and he did. He needed one person to believe in him, and there was that one person there. Her whole purpose may have been that man. Maybe he was her purpose and her mission. And so now he booms this beautiful music out to the world. That's amazing. He's an inspiration to all children who have suffered in childhood. You can change your life. You can be different. So if you are a person who has a tendency to make the same mistake over and over and over again, and you're not learning it, one of the problems you're going to face is that the karmic lessons get harder and harder.
I've heard
because
this.
you didn't pay attention the first time. And the easiest way to see this in action, are parents. If you have a 2-year-old and this 2-year-old starts to hit and beat you, what do you think is going to happen when that 2-year-old is 16 and you've never said no to him?
Oh my goodness.
What do you think is going to happen to your sweet, adorable little girl that you can't say no to because you're afraid she won't love you? And she's going to be behind the wheel of a car and she has no conscience.
Oh my goodness.
So that karma is going to be visited on you harder and harder and harder every time with these kids.
That makes sense.
But if you stop the child and, you don't have to be violent. You can say no, you can stand in the corner, we can do timeout. No, this isn't the way that we're behaving, and then really positively reinforce behavior that you want, which is a socially acceptable behavior. It makes a big difference. The other element you see, and we see this every day, has to do with the karma of ethics.
Okay.
What are your ethics? And
your ethics meaning your own personal values, or what's ethically correct for humanity collectively, or what do you mean by that?
All of the above.
Okay.
If you are a physician and you knowingly give a medication to a person because someone says that's a protocol you have to use, but that protocol is going to be absolutely detrimental for that person. But you're supposed to do it because that's what you're told. But you took an oath to do no harm, the Hippocratic Oath. You have to decide what are your ethics. And the medical community is facing this now every day.
Oh, yeah.
Every day. Instead of saying, you treat this person based on what that person and their body and their medical history actually require. Somebody says, that's the protocol for that symptom, do it. Well, physicians are in a really tough place now. And that's been a challenge. You're a politician and someone offers you a bribe. If you take that bribe, the next time then that person wants their quid pro quo. They want something in return. Well, the bribes get bigger, but oh my gosh, the favors in return are going to get harder and harder and harder until eventually things collapse. And you see this on a microcosm in families where the parents will say to their children, you can't drink and you can't do this, but the parents drink all the time. The parents don't mind getting drunk in front of their children, but they tell their children not to do that. So now you have the karma of hypocrisy.
Oof. Yeah.
Or you tell your kids you really love their mother or their father, but you're having an affair on the side. How do you balance those ethics? Are you honest and say, oh, I screwed up, shouldn't have done that? If you say, do as I say, not as I do, you have lost all credibility with your children, your family, your spouse. And we're in times when people are doing terrible things to each other, to their own neighborhoods. They've forgotten what, just following basic law and order is. You don't steal, you don't hurt, you don't harm other people. But somehow society is making that okay. Inside each of us, there is a barometer that knows right and wrong. And every time you ignore it, you take a debit from your karmic bank account. And and pretty soon you're running on empty. And now you owe everybody. That's not going to be a good place to be.
As you're saying this, what I'm feeling is that I can see how it could be really challenging for a lot of people, especially if they have fear to face something in the unknown that could be helpful for someone else. For example, someone doing the right thing morally for humanity versus losing their job over it. It's like, okay, boss says this, or the medical industries, the companies say do this, pharma says do this, and if you don't, you're going to lose your job. And then at that point, someone has a responsibility. Do I want to do the right thing and not give this patient this medication because of the side effects and it could make things worse? Or do I want to lose my job and maybe even lose ever working as a doctor ever again? It seems like people really have to face a lot of their fears. And if facing your fear is part of your karma, then I guess one has to really choose what their value system is in their life.
And we will be tested. Every single one of us will be tested. We will have to stand up and say yes or no to things. And if you, in the Navy, we called it no guts, no glory. But sometimes there are small victories and you have to be willing to look at them and stand up for doing the right thing. And it's not easy. It causes you a lot of stress and difficulty. And if you stand up and you find others who are willing to stand up and say, what's happening is wrong, then you earn a certain amount of karma for that in a really positive way, especially if you go about correcting it through legal channels where you're following a normal legal path rather than just taking it out on everyone.
Right. That makes sense.
We are in challenging times. It doesn't mean that we have to stop being the good people we have always been. We have to be really awake.
Oh, yeah. So how can somebody become more awake to creating a higher frequency karmic life?
Ask some questions. I have read karma and frequency. Some of them are basic. Some of the most basic things. Don't smoke anything. Don't smoke. And if you're drinking alcohol and you're psychic, you're opening the door to being haunted on a daily basis. I hate to say it, but yes. I mean, who doesn't love a good rum cake? But if you're having to have a glass of bourbon every night, you're opening yourself up to some really detrimental things, if nothing else, for what it does to the organs in your body and what it does to your brain. If you're chronically depressed, you've got to find out, you've got to start looking at what does make you happy, because you're poisoning the air for everyone around you. You're toxic if you're chronically depressed.
Right.
And my mother was chronically depressed, and it's as if wherever she went, it was just nothing you were ever going to do is going to please that person. Now, let's look at this from another point of view. And I'm using myself as an example.
Okay.
If you have a parent, a sibling, a boss, a neighbor, no matter what you do, it's never enough. It's never good enough. You have the, if only you had, or the military has a name for it. It's called faint praise. This would have been wonderful if only. Well, and then you basically make sure you control all the power so that that person can never feel fully successful. And if you begin to identify that this person is doing that to you, then your response creates a karmic ripple effect. If you don't choose to be the victim anymore, and it's a conscious choice, you can really change your life. And I can love my mother, but I would not be on the phone with her without one of my siblings as a witness. I would not let her have an influence on my life any longer. And when I did that, a lot of the stress in my life simply vanished because I took my power back. And she incurred negative karma for the power she had over me. But once I stopped that, I actually helped her karma by not allowing her to incur negative karma by harming me. So when you're standing up for yourself to an abusive person, then you earn the karma of stopping their negative actions from incurring negative karma for them. Now you say, well, why would I care about that? Because it's cause and effect. If you stop them from doing harm to you, the ripple effect is you're stopping them from doing harm to themselves.
That's amazing. And so that's, I mean, what makes sense to me here is this is why boundaries are important.
Exactly. I have people who call me, they would call me at all hours of the day and night and say, can you interpret this dream? Or I need you to help me with this. It's like, it's 9:30 at night. I have a life and a family. And so, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available for that. This is a boundary and I'm asking for you to accept that. Now, if that person doesn't want to accept that, they don't give a, they don't care about me. It's only what they want. And what we're seeing right now are a lot of narcissistic personalities. They're, you see borderline personalities where they will bleed you dry. They will just they will just suck you dry of everything. You have manic depressive personalities, and a lot of that behavior can be controlled with, unfortunately, pharmaceuticals like lithium, because there's an absence of that element, that mineral in the brain. You need a certain amount of lithium, and if you don't have it, you have to replace it. And when you're able to take your power back from a tough situation, or you're married to an abusive spouse, and you decide that you are going to leave, and your children have begged you to leave for years because they're tired of being abused. Sure. You keep going back to him or her over and over and over. At some point, you are the abuser, because you keep
So
inviting it
true.
upon yourself and your children. When you leave and you find that you build an exit strategy and you stick with it, you start to break these bonds of attachment with abuse. And when you break the bonds of attachment with abuse, you have to keep working on it and getting therapy. Otherwise, you'll go right back to it because your frequency hasn't quite changed enough to move past it. And that's, again, a really important thing.
And is this also how ancestral karma is healed, by somebody breaking that cycle?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is a great question. I have seen this happen repeatedly. When one family member starts on their karmic path and they change, it's like cogs in a wheel. If you change and these people are connected to you, either they have to slip away and you're moving on with who you are, or and they're going to stay in the pit they are. You're rising. They can rise with you. You'll extend your hand. If they don't choose that path, it's okay to move on. I had a client who, loveliest woman, this lovely, lovely lady. And she was married to a guy who looked like, one of these seafarers from the Old Spice commercials. He was, God, this man was good looking. And he told her that he had all these different affairs because his Kundalini was rising. And I was all I could do not to just explode laughing on the phone, because I don't know that it was his Kundalini that was exactly rising. And she said, I have this question. I'm studying and I'm working and I'm raising my frequency and I'm opening myself up to my spiritual path. And if I change, will I have to reincarnate with him?
That's a great question.
And I said that, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because it was a really insightful question. And I said, well, I'm not the Oracle at Delphi, so I can't exactly answer that. What I can offer you is, if he as an individual gave you this experience and you learned everything you could from the experience on a really positive karmic level, and you didn't harm him, you just moved forward with your life, then you don't need him as an experience again. Maybe someone else will need him as an experience. But you're now able to move forward and have new experiences. Karma wants to know if you got the lesson. But once you've really gotten it, now you move up to the next level and the next level and the next level. But you will be tested. Make no mistake. You will be tested.
What about his karma?
Well, his karma, if he accepts that they're now divorced and they've built a friendship for the sake of their children and they're not cruel to each other, he doesn't know how to live without having, one relationship after the other. But that in itself is symptomatic of a person who cannot make a long-lasting bond. There's something that's happened, a crack in his foundation, that makes him unable to have a lasting, loving relationship. He may not understand it. He may not have the emotional capacity to even face it. And if that's the case, then she is observing that it wasn't her fault, that's right. His personality. She doesn't have to live with that anymore. Well, she's not going to sit in judgment of him. He is who he is. Some people have been so abused. I had another client whose husband had 400 affairs. And the way she was able to heal her emotional trauma from the divorce was realizing that his childhood was so horrific. The real miracle was he wasn't a serial killer. He was not a murderer. Mm-hmm. He was a kind and gentle man who was generous to a fault. But he was endlessly looking for love in every face he found, because it's like in the movie Ghost Helpers, you have that Jello man and he keeps taking all this food, the ghostly Jello guy. It's never enough. No matter how much energy, how much loving energy he gets, it's never enough. There isn't anyone who can satisfy that need, because the need wasn't satisfied when he was a small child, a baby. You don't pick children up and hug them and love them. They don't develop that sense of inner fortitude and all those systems in the brain that need that loving touch and hugging and kissing and laughing and stability. That person doesn't get that. So you're never going to be able to make up for that. And accepting what you cannot change is also part of your karmic path of learning. And accepting what you cannot change, and knowing the difference. If you can change something, great. But you have to accept that there are people you're never going to be able to change, and that's not your job to do that for them.
Correct. Speaking of this, accepting what you cannot change is part of karma. Is it possible? I'm assuming anything is possible, but just based on your experience and what you know, that we incarnate and not learn a specific lesson because our soul, it didn't come here to learn that specific lesson, that karmic, to get rid of that karmic debt, but to just be in that situation and to have a life experience about it, of it, like fully in depth. For example, right now, when you were talking about, or let's just say that somebody gets abused over and over, and they don't leave the abuser. But is it possible? Could it be possible that they're not meant to leave the abuser, and that's part of their experience that they incarnated here? Part of their soul contract is to see what it's like as a soul to have a life as an abused person, and not necessarily run away from it or learn from it or develop boundaries.
We're always here to learn. So if you start out in life as an abused person, you still have the free will to stop the abuse.
Okay.
To the best of your ability. Now, to get back to a little bit denser question, some people do things life after life. Some people are murdered by the same person life after life after life. I've certainly seen that. People who take their own lives do it life after life after life after life. There has to be one life where the person who they love dies, and they don't kill themselves right away. That they come to terms with their depression or their grief, their crushing grief. I've had clients who kill themselves, life after life after this one particular soul died. And the goal of the whole life purpose was to live past the death of that person.
Okay.
That is a huge lesson. It doesn't mean they don't feel it. It means that they found the moral and spiritual courage, which also means many times they can reach out to God to help them. You're not alone, but many people feel alone. I'm not saying karma is you have to talk to God. I would not say that to someone. That would be wrong. If you choose to reach out to the divine as part of your spiritual growth, you might find things go a little more smoothly because you have opened yourself up to a divine light. And without focusing on a religion or the guilt of religion that so many of them have, although not necessarily the Tibetans, I don't see that. All of those things make a difference.
That definitely makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. And so what's the main purpose of karma then? What is karma here for? To teach us lessons?
The whole purpose of karma is for us to understand that the actions we take have consequences.
Okay.
I mean, let's just look at San Francisco. If you take away all law and order, you have completely destroyed a city.
Right.
All of downtown, stores that have been there over 100 years have closed. And it's not safe to go into the downtown area. So that the action was, we're not going to enforce laws anymore. And the reaction is, you have destroyed the entire economy of a city. And That's huge, because you can see an action and reaction in the space of a few months. Sometimes people are just pretty lawless and cruel, and it doesn't mean you've discriminated against them. It just means that sometimes people have a mental illness which makes them have criminal behavior, and they should not be with other people where they can harm themselves or others. That's just something to consider.
That definitely is something to consider. A lot of people don't think about this.
Well, if you have this much lawlessness, look at all the people who lost their jobs, all the suppliers, all of the people who own the buildings where all the businesses were. All of those people, it's all of those economies, or those micro economies of businesses and families and relatives, are destroyed. That's a huge reaction based on a handful of catastrophic decisions.
It really is. And speaking of that, what I'm thinking of right now, or what I've thought of aside from what you're saying right now, I started to somehow in my mind, I thought of Earth. And what about our karma with Earth? Let's say that we're not recycling, or that we're not being conscious about getting bamboo toilet paper instead of, something that's environmentally hazardous. What if we're not being conscious about saving the planet? What kinds of karmic consequences does that have on us as an individual or a collective even?
Well, ironically, I'm actually involved in something. As soon as we hang up, I have to go back to it. I'm in a town that has an aquifer that supplies all the wells for the rural people and all the water for the entire city. And the city is allowing all of that land to be built up and cutting down 400- and 500-year-old trees, so that a builder can make a ton of money.
Oh
But
my
once you
goodness.
destroy the trees are holding the ground, and the arsenic, the ground is full of arsenic, but the trees filter the arsenic out. The trees and the vegetation and the roots filter all that out. The city has actually really clean water. But once you have bulldozed and put in neighborhoods in the only aquifer for hundreds of miles, you will destroy everything. Everything will be destroyed in the town. And there are a handful of us who are going to every agency we can get our hands on to stop the slaughter of the trees, the wildlife corridor, the ecological zone. And I mean, these trees are staggering. We were taking photographs. One is 11.5 feet in circumference, another is 12 feet, another is 22 feet around. This developer will not turn a hair. They will just slaughter everything. And he doesn't leave a twig standing, nothing. So where does the runoff go? Where does the arsenic go? It goes into fields and streams and starts to poison all of the wells, all of the salmon streams. And I've been at it for 15 months fighting this. I now have a team I'm working side by side with, and we are building massive cases, and we're bringing all of these agencies in to desperately save the water for this town. So, and we feel like we're holding these candles in the dark, but a candle in the dark is still a candle in the dark. It's still lighting darkness. And we are not going to give up easily. We've had some super bright people, and they're amazing. And we're just horrified at what we're seeing.
It is horrible and it is horrifying. But I'm wondering if, let's just hypothetically say that all your hard work, and I'm not, and by any means, I'm not trying to lower the vibration or bring in any negativity, but I'm just trying to think outside the box and put things together and understand karma here. What if all this hard work isn't able to make any change and the trees still get slaughtered? At what point is that part of accepting what you cannot change and that being part of karma?
Well, before that happens, there are a lot of us who will be standing in front of bulldozers. I mean,
Wow.
that I have done that before.
Wow,
And
Tina.
that doesn't make you a liberal or a conservative, by the way. It makes you someone who loves nature. Liberals and conservatives both love nature. And it doesn't mean you're anti-development. It means that, why would you put a gun to your head and pull the trigger, which means you can't live anymore if you don't have water?
Right.
And by bringing attention to a problem and not giving up, because I've seen several people give up. Well, we lost it. They're going to build a mobile home park and mow down all these trees. And there are, like I say, a handful of us who are lighting the way. And sometimes it takes a handful of people to light the way to change the world. And I'll use an example.
I love that.
When the American Revolution started, this is your history lesson for the day. Only 3% of the colonists backed leaving England and being a separate country. Remember, Canada didn't do that. Canada is still a Commonwealth country of England. Think about that. Yes, they're an independent country, but they don't have a constitution like we do. They don't have the founding fathers that we do. Living right on the border, you get a real dose of the difference between Canada and the United States. Yeah. And we all sound the same. I've got Canadian neighbors, I've got Australian neighbors, I got all kinds of interesting people. But 3% of the original 13 colonies were standing up to the British. 3%.
Wow.
Those 3%,
I love it,
changed the world.
I love this.
I would offer that even though it looks like the odds are not in your favor, even though you feel overwhelmed by the enormity of what you're trying to do, if you're following the rule of law and you're building your process based on the rule of law of fact, not emotion, you have a higher probability. And what did they do when they built the country? They built in the rule of law, which is the Constitution. It is the backbone of the Republic. And that is my speech for today.
I love that. It's very motivating. Thank you. Pumped me up for sure. I love that. So one more question here. What about karma and like animals? Do dogs and cats and birds, do they also have to follow the laws of karma? Do they innately know this stuff? Do they have karma? Or is this only human?
Animals are all animals are part of nature. Laws of nature are also inviolate. And some animals are a little more elevated on their spiritual levels. I mean, dogs are a higher spiritual level than frogs, but frogs serve a really important purpose. Each animal serves a purpose, whether it's to help a human being, provide food for human beings, or to maintain the environment and the insects and the birds. The sound of birds triggers trees to move nutrients through. All the insects underground function with the mycelium that enables trees to communicate with each other. If you cut down every tree, there's no way to build a forest easily. It takes much longer. If you leave the grandmother trees, you can build a forest 3 or 4 times faster. And these are the old growth trees because they have all the knowledge of how to fight drought and insects and pestilence. Those trees have that knowledge. And with that knowledge, they keep a forest healthy. So all of nature has to follow natural law, action and reaction. Trees don't have a choice where they're planted. This is where the seeds fall. They have to make the best of where they are. This is true for animals. Wherever you're born into, you have to make the best of where you are. You can't pick up and, go get a car and leave. And that is an inherent difference. So if you're kind to an animal, it's astonishing what can come back to you. If you are cruel to an animal and an animal hurts you, well, there's karma attached to that for you, not so much for the animal. So if you have an animal that you know is dangerous, and the animal bites somebody horrifically and is destroyed, the human being, the owner, earns the karma, not necessarily the animal.
That makes sense. This has been an incredible discussion. Always having incredible discussions with Tina Erwin. Thank you so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. What is something you want the world to know about karma? Something you feel is important.
Karma is inherently fair. It is logical. It is not a punishment. It is a reaction to an action taken. So when you're moving through your days, create an awareness of how, if I do this, what reaction can I expect? And then seek the wisdom. And if you don't know, ask, dear God, I really need a little help right now with this decision or this choice, or what should I do to make the wisest decision? And then karma will take care of itself.
I love this. Actually, I have one more question. As you said that, I thought of, if people become more intentional with their actions, whether they're saying something intentionally or acting a certain way intentionally, or just setting forth intentions, can that also change your karma by just being a little bit more intentional? Can you raise your vibration that way?
Oh, absolutely. If you, instead of just reacting, if you go, well, let me think about this a little bit. Let me sleep on it overnight. What are the possible scenarios of responses that I could make, or someone could respond to me? And that will enable you to slow down a little bit and think through your response. And it might be much, much better. Maybe the person who you're really angry at had a bad day, or maybe they're afraid because they did something really wrong and you caught them. And maybe there's a way to save face. We actually had a city council meeting last night where I gave every single person in the room an opportunity to save face and do the right thing. And everybody just sat there and looked scared. It's like, you could make this a public park, keep every single tree, take that developer, put his name on the park because he donated the land for the good of the city, the good of the county. Everyone walks away a winner. It could be the Christmas miracle. And they all laughed at me.
Oh my goodness.
But the suggestion has enormous merit, because there are tax implications to that, which are positive for the city and for the developer. Everyone could walk away a winner. So if you're looking at a solution without winners or losers, everyone saves face, you have a greater opportunity of being successful. Did everybody agree with me last night? No. Did I plant a seed? Yes. And you never quite know how a seed is going to react to its environment.
I love this, Tina. Thank you so much for your incredible words of wisdom. I love your energy. I love connecting with you every time. How can our viewers or watchers and our listeners find you and your incredible books on karma?
You can go to ghosthelpers.com or tinaerwin.com. And all the books are on both those websites. And they're all on Amazon as well. Absolutely. And 6 of the 8 are on audiobooks. So they're worth
incredible.
Having.
I love that. Thank you so much, Tina. And I look forward to connecting with you again in the near future. Happy holidays to you and all of your loved ones.
Happy holidays to you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.